Welcome to the podcast, Bilawal Sidhu.
Great to be here.
Bilawal is a host of the TED AI show. He's a company scout for venture capital firm A16Z, which is pretty cool. A creator on YouTube, TikTok, X, everything, 1.4 million subs plus amongst all those. Used to work at Google and has a focus on AI, AR, VR, all the acronyms.
Hell
nice.
Yeah.
Dude, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Well, I mean, the big topic right now is kind of like AI and everything. And I go to all these meetups and people are like, I'm going to make an AI this and AI that. One weird thing I'm seeing though is not no one, but a lot of people are not making money with it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing this too? Is this a common thing that's happening? Like all these people starting stuff, but not necessarily making money with it, getting some growth, but then kind of stalling out.
I mean, the people who's making the real money is NVIDIA right now, right?
Yeah. All the big companies are.
Absolutely.
Google, everyone. Yeah. They're making
the hyperscalers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone who has economies of scale or are hyperscalers themselves that have other parts of their business that are subsidizing all the work they're doing to train these models, absolutely making money. And then they're selling these services, which is also generating revenue. It's not nearly offsetting the cost of training just yet. But there are people making revenue. I would say in the AI creation space, if you think about MidJourney in 2024 is making 200 mil in revenue.
Wow.
Runway is doing 120 mil. Now, a lot of that money, like I said, is going back into the training the next big bad foundational model to go up against some of these folks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the fact of the matter is, I think there's a lot of solopreneurs and indiepreneurs that are very nimble. About a year ago, it was kind of, really trendy to say, I'm not a ChatGPT wrapper company, I'm training my own models. And now fast forward year and a half, everyone's like, that is a stupid business model. Use the subsidized models because there's a race between all the big players to literally bring the cost of intelligence too cheap to meter. And there is an opportunity there for small, nimble teams to make money. It's not going to be big money, but everyone else has to align with a hyperscaler. And that's what you're seeing happening, right? OpenAI is partnered with Microsoft. You got Anthropic, I was reading before I walked in here, signed another deal with Amazon. And I think that trend will continue. And of course, Google has Google Cloud themselves.
Yeah, I don't know if people know, but literally Microsoft and Play are trying to buy into nuclear reactors just to get enough energy to train their models and stuff. Yes. That's how big it is. It's not exactly something that a small player can get into.
Exactly.
I will say though, whenever the ChatGPT wrapper thing, and for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically any piece of software that just has ChatGPT doing all the work in the back end. And then you're just the UX, UI on the web for it. When it was ChatGPT wrapper phase, I feel like all the AI companies were actually making money. Because I remember when GPT-2 came out, you couldn't actually just log on to ChatGPT and use it. You had to use it through an API. Most people don't know how to use that. So a bunch of companies were like, we'll provide the front end for it.
Oh, Jasper, Copy AI.
Yeah, all those companies were making a ton of money just right away.
Totally.
Because people wanted to use this technology and you had to go through an intermediary. Then ChatGPT comes along, drops a bomb hey, by the way, it's all free and it's awesome. And even with prompt engineering, it's just you didn't even really need good prompts. You just talk to it like a human.
Totally.
And it worked. And then I feel like a lot of those companies had to readjust their model because now being a ChatGPT wrapper was just useless almost.
Absolutely on point.
Yeah.
And it feels like this always mirrors a platform shift when it happens, right? In the start of mobile, if you remember the iOS App Store, there were all these crazy apps that were making so much money.
Flashlight.
Oh my God. Yeah. The Flashlight app made an insane amount of money. And eventually these became sort of first party functionality feature sets inside at the operating system level itself. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely seeing the shift where use cases that align with these larger companies, they're going to roll solutions themselves, right? But there's a whole world that they're not going to tackle. And I think that's where there will be a lot more money made, especially as the cost to deliver these generative AI solutions keeps going down. I would say on the text and coding side, these APIs are really cheap and you can make an amazing business around it. On the visual creation side, and especially the 3D side, these models are still expensive. And so that's obviously going to eat into your margin as a startup right now.
Yeah. So in the AI stuff, where are you seeing is a lot of hype and where is it kind of real? I feel like we've seen this gameplay before with the creation of the internet, right? When the internet came out, everyone's like pets.com, the famous big flops, right?
Oh, yeah.
Turns out they were right. They were just 20 years too early, right? They didn't have mobile phones, so they had to install hardware in all their delivery vans, whereas now you could anyone with their phone can just do it, right? Like Uber. So where are you seeing kind of actual real stuff happen versus what is hyped?
Sure.
Can I give you an example real quick?
Yeah, please go for it.
I thought writing blog posts with AI would be like the biggest thing because it used to take so much time. It was so hard for people to do that you had to hire out a bunch of other writers. Now you can write a blog post instantly, and I thought this is going to be game changing. Turns out most people don't need a random blog post that's 10,000 words anymore. It's almost irrelevant, and people actually don't want something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing like that I thought would be high, but it's not. Where are you seeing kind of like actual use cases that kind of weird by any chance?
Ooh, the weird stuff. I mean, like, maybe let's get the obvious stuff out of the way, right?
Okay.
Like, I mean, so I think LLMs are huge, right? Both for like writing, creative writing use cases, summarization, like all those productivity use cases. How many Zoom meetings do we sit in? Every single video chat app now has some sort of like, automatic transcription and summarization. That stuff's useful and it adds up. If you're thinking about knowledge work, it adds up. Now, granted, yeah, you had a bunch of extensions that were making money, and then like Google's like, hey, it's in Meet directly, but it's still useful and it's not hype at all, right? On the visual creation side, I think I'm very excited, just given how ubiquitous of a media just images, video, and audio is. So like, I would say like images are a solved problem in my mind. If you want to go do like a really phenomenal image generation, MidJourney's phenomenal. If you want to get text into your creations, hey, Flux is pretty good too, but also Ideogram is phenomenal. If you haven't gone and used Ideogram, it's like the first thing I've seen where you can type in a prompt or give it an image visual reference, and it gives you as close to a final YouTube thumbnail as I've ever seen.
Wait, even text?
Including text.
AI is notoriously bad with text on images.
Solved problem now, dude.
Really?
It's phenomenal.
Interesting.
It's an Ideogram, really phenomenal team. They're the ex-Google Imagen team. So they left Google to go move way faster, funded by A16Z. And then on the other side of that is open source models too, right? Like, so you've got Stability, Stable Diffusion, which ostensibly kicked off the image generation revolution, now going through a transformation in leadership. They got the ex-Weta Digital guy. They've got James Cameron joining the board. But there's another open source player that's like shaking up the game the last 3 months, and it's called Flux. Basically, the original Stable Diffusion researchers, it's called Black Forest Labs. Flux is a phenomenal model. So perhaps a lot of the products you and your viewers are already like engaging with are probably using Flux under the hood. And it lets you do things like train the perfect digital twin facsimile of you so you can then put yourself in those thumbnails and throw text on top. And it's fully open source. So images, in my mind, are like a solved problem. And you throw in the Photoshop layer for the fine-grained stuff. They've got generative fill. They're working on a bunch of other stuff that I just talked to Adobe about at Adobe Max. So all that combined, images is good to go.
That is awesome, because I do think whenever people make content, the hardest thing for most people, general people, is to make images.
Totally.
But back when I was in high school, I knew how to use like this ripped version of Photoshop, and that put me 10 times ahead of everyone else because I could make images. Yeah. Even stuff back in the day, just like cropping an image to the right size. I know it sounds dumb. Even that was difficult for the average person to do.
Yeah.
And now with AI, you got like all sorts of crazy stuff. You can never put it into Photoshop and get layers though. There's all these problems. You couldn't get text.
Yeah.
You couldn't get layers. So like something looks like a little funky, someone's arm is like this, and you want to make it like that.
Totally.
You couldn't do it unless you kind of really cropped it and everything.
Yeah, and then you have to in-paint the background and all that. Yeah.
But it sounds like that's just all.
Oh yeah, it's all solved. You know.
I mean, this stuff is like less than 2 years old, and we're just like, there's all these problems, and then like 6 months later, like, yeah, we solved it.
You know, it's especially wild. It's like a couple weeks ago, I was going and looking at my MidJourney V3 images, which are like circa 2022. And some of the OG Dali images. Yeah. And I'm just like, we thought this was cool. This looks freaking
It's like anime garbage. It doesn't look
It looks like I had this like kind of like all these floaty artifacts. It just looked very, very uncanny. And now it's like indistinguishable from reality, especially Flux. People are doing these like Polaroid renditions of like, have you seen that website of like thispersondoesn'texist.com?
Of course. Yeah.
It's like, it's like it has passed the visual Turing test. That's how I put it. Now, video isn't quite there yet. There's so much in video where on the surface, it looks pretty good. I mean, you got Runway. The Chinese models are even better. I'm talking Minimax. I'm talking Kling. There seems to be a data problem, but also kind of like a paradigm problem in the sense that like everything's kind of slow motion-y. They don't fully understand the physics of the dynamic world that we live in. Like a character will like randomly change ethnicities and the structure of their face will change or the environment will change. But we've already gotten so good with Sora and Google Veo and some of these newer models that are coming out that are pushing on that too. So I think like in another year, we'll be at a place where like 60, 90, 2-minute videos are going to be a solved problem as well. Long form still seems elusive, and we can get into that if you're interested. But even for short form content, just think of the disruption that's there. Like my buddy Rowan Chuang, who runs one of the biggest AI newsletters, he's automated his reels. He's got the fastest like news breaking to Instagram reel pipeline in the game right now. And it's wild because like, if you think about it to your ChatGPT point, that blog, like the value of summarized blogs that you were bringing up, all right, new research paper drops, new feature announcement. Everyone is like Claude, ChatGPT, summarizing the same stuff and putting it on the same platforms in text, thread form, whatever. But video still has latency of a couple days. And so if you can be the set of creators that get that out faster, deliver the same essential message, it's phenomenal. And what I'll close by saying here is like, the wildest thing talking to Rowan about this is like he expected there to be this like crazy backlash of like, what? This isn't authentic. This isn't you. Nobody cares. They're like, this content is valuable, and I would much rather see a 60-second summary than read a blog, and boom, that says it all.
I'd say people who are 30 and older care now. Because we were used to people, it was all humans. I think people born today will be like, who cares?
Totally.
Is the information correct? I don't care if a computer makes it. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, it's like a fish in water doesn't notice. Like, or that's a fair point.
Because I went through like I was talking with the SEO guy. I was like, should we write when we put ChatGPT, basic stuff in there? And he's just like, I think Google has like given up. It's just like, is it good content? Doesn't matter. So the distinction between like computer made versus man made, I think will go away unless it's explicit that you are creating it. Like if your Twitter handle is you writing stuff, people expect it to be you. But for the most part, just like a news update, who cares who it's written by?
It's a great question. It's like, imagine if like YouTube created a feature where like it could engage with your comment section on your behalf. Would that be authentic or not? Like, would people like it or not? I don't know. It's like, it's interesting. I could see both cases.
Well, they might have they might have an artificial thing commenting on your stuff. You're commenting back the artificial system. And this is two robots talking to each other and humans are like, what's going on?
You're just describing LinkedIn at this point. Because like they put in this feature, right, where it's like, they've got this like rubric now. It's like people who post at least once a week or something get more impressions, and they give you this sort of like gamified leaderboard of do 4 posts a week. But I see so many of the comments, especially on LinkedIn, but certainly on X too, that are just LLM summarizations of the content. Oh, this is really insightful. How summary? And I'm like, what is this?
We see it whenever we send out a newsletter, we get a certain amount of replies that we know are AI.
Yeah.
It's just like bad prompts reply. And you're just like, I wonder what they're doing. I think they're just trying to like get their sender reputation higher. So they get spam later. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but I'm like, there's something fishy about this. They're doing something.
I don't get the end game, in these situations.
Yeah. But so in terms of video, you are doing a lot of VR and AR stuff. Yeah. And I feel like AR VR has been like kicked in the teeth a bunch of times. It rears its head. It's reared its head since I was a child. People like, I remember like, do you remember like Nintendo had a VR thing? Like
back
like
in the day,
red points of light and stuff like that. Yeah. I remember using it and being like, oh, I see that this could be cool, but right now, I mean, this is obviously garbage. And so then I guess the best we have right now is the Apple Vision Pro. Whereas, when people try it, they're like, wow, this is cool. Of course, it costs $3,500 plus tax. So it's expensive. And it doesn't do much yet, right? I think there are certain use cases for it.
Reminds me of the first iPad, It's like, oh, cool. I can do some things, but what else? It's a big iPhone with less apps.
Yeah, or even the first iPhone. It was kind of like a toy. It didn't have a keyboard. It really took to the iPhone 3GS before people really started getting iPhones.
Agreed.
Before it was like known that this is the platform to go forward to. So like, where are we now? I mean, I've been hearing about, AR, VR. Mark Zuckerberg has been hard into it. What do you think is like the final form factor that's going to be mainstream? Is it just going to be what everyone thinks, like sunglasses? It's going to be just the glasses? Is that going to be the final thing?
I think it's going to be two things, right? It's like, so what are the devices we use today? There's definitely the smartphone, which is by far the most ubiquitous computing device, right? Like if you think about the global south, markets like India, for example, nobody has like a laptop or a PC, but they've got a phone, right? Same thing in China. A lot of people just use that as the primary computing device. That's going to get replaced by lightweight AR glasses, undoubtedly. Like that's the form factor I think seems to be converging towards. Yeah, it may work in concert with like some other thingamajigs or wearables that you're wearing. But their desktop computing experience, the laptop computing experience, to me is going to be this sort of like a thinner version of the Vision Pro that almost looks like ski goggles. And what it means is you've got your ultra wide multi-monitor setup, like your Jarvis assistant on steroids everywhere you go. And funnily enough, that's how I use the Apple Vision Pro today. Is like when I'm traveling and I'm in a hotel room and I just need to like lock in, as the kids like to say these days, and like crank out some boring emails. Put that thing on, automatically links to my MacBook Pro. Boom. So I think you'll have there'll still be two categories of devices that are, I think of AR to VR as AR is augmenting reality as you see it. You take reality as a basis and augment it with things. And then virtual reality is replacing reality and infusing yourself in it and other things that you're caring about, like your identity, your body movements, your environment, all that good stuff. And so I think we'll have two categories of devices. But of course, like the market today, laptops and desktops are a much smaller market than smartphones. And I think you'll see exactly that play out.
But I mean, I almost sometimes every once in a while, I'll kind of daydream about different technologies.
Sure.
Like if I could go back in time, like just like 50 years even, and take like one piece of technology back, I think if you had a pair of AR glasses that just showed text. Not even just overlay text, which is very possible nowadays.
Totally. Yeah,
they have those on the market.
Absolutely.
It had something like ChatGPT just intake whatever you're saying or everyone's saying around me and give me answers back to it.
Yeah,
I could go up and like 50 years ago just be the best stand-up comedy person in the world.
Totally. Yeah.
Have like a pre-written script, steal everyone's jokes or have it make jokes and just read them off in my glasses. No one could see it, and you're just wearing these Woody Allen glasses.
Yeah.
And you would just be the king of the world. You could say anything. You'd have the fastest comebacks to anything.
Yeah.
You could quote stats off the top of your head. People would think you're the smartest person on the entire planet.
100%. Yeah.
And I always wonder, like, are there products out there like that just do this, just like LLM based kind of things? I mean, the technology there to just overlay text is existing. Have you seen anything like that? Is it helpful or is it crappy?
Oh, it's amazing. It's funny. That's where I started my career. This is back into your point about the many false starts of AR, VR. I started off working on Google Glass stuff for boring use cases like a field service expert on an oil rig going through a maintenance checklist that needs to be hands-free to see exactly the kind of text you're talking about, right? And of course, back then it was like this little monocular display on the right side, almost like the Dragon Ball Z scouting glasses or Universal Soldier, if people have seen that movie.
I've tried them.
Yeah.
And it was like a centimeter by centimeter type of thing. It could show like an arrow.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Or like little like vignettes of text. But think about it, that was like even before like speech to text AI got good. It was so early. Now you've got glasses like the X-Real. Those are the ones that I point people to. They look very lightweight. They look like a pair of, let's say, like kind of more, I don't know, let's just say eccentric sunglasses. You tether them to a phone and they can give you basically the equivalent of an HD screen that you can look at to consume content or pull up whatever else you like. I love that form factor. Snap glasses are also looking pretty good. They're maybe the next level up in terms of more like holographic displays and 3D. So I've been playing with those a lot lately. Still, I would say a developer kit on steroids. Like you can still buy these things as like essentially a year or two long lease. But it's still a little heavyweight, right? And so with all of these form factors, I think the thing we need to remember is like just that old Peter Thiel quote of just the world of atoms is way harder than the world of bits. And so we're pushing up against physics here. Like, how do we squeeze like a big enough battery, enough compute with a decent thermal footprint, wide enough field of view, good enough pixel density, which is why it was very interesting to me to see Apple go down the Vision Pro route. I would have always thought that they do something like the Meta glasses, which are maybe the notch below the X-Real in terms of immersion, in the sense that like, but they're also the glasses that I use the most. They're like effectively AirPods replacements for me. All there are is like normal looking Ray-Bans. They've got a camera on them. They've got great mics and they got great speakers. That's all it does. But it can start doing a lot of the things you're talking about where like you can basically pull from the intelligence of a large language model and some of these visual language models too, so they can like react to what you're seeing, but except it's going to give you your cue through audio or on your phone. So I see that spectrum there, but I was very surprised to see Apple being like, no. The North Star is this like full immersion thing. How do we get towards full immersion now and create something that's akin to essentially a public facing developer kit to get there as they compress that almost like the Tesla model of going from the Tesla Roadster to the Model 3.
Yeah. I mean, I've used a lot of the different. I was very into VR for a while. I had all these different. I had the whole setup. I had the different. I have all the quests.
Hell yeah!
And I kind of stopped using it quite as much. And the biggest problem is it's very antisocial. Like when you got that thing on, you can't share it. You can't share the experience with those around you. And so I used to do it in my living room, and one of my friends was playing a boxing game and punched my TV off my wall by accident. So it's like there's obvious like weird things like that are being solved. And when I first tried Apple Vision Pro, or the thing that blew my mind, a little knob on the side where you can dial in and out of reality.
Oh yeah.
And the second I saw that, I was like, they nailed it.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, that little concept, I don't think people realize how important it was.
Totally.
And what I mean is like, you can go full immersion to where like I'm on the moon and you're not there.
Totally.
Then you could dial it back to where it'll show you pertinent things around you. For example, this is in my face. I could actually hit it.
Totally.
So it'll show me this.
Yeah.
And then it'll show me that like there's a human there,
Yeah.
but he's kind of a shadow. So like just FYI, there's a person there. I can dial back and fully see you.
Totally.
And then the world disappears. I remember thinking, that's the kind of granularity I want to see. Like I want to choose how in this I am. And I could just go in and out like that. That was the big deal for me. And I was just like, oh, okay. So just completely taking over the eye space does actually make sense if you can like choose how in and out you are.
You're absolutely nailing it. And I think that's why they made that decision, because it can do AR and VR too, except it's doing AR. The technical term people keep calling it is mixed reality, which is like instead of just having transparent glasses and displays. And again, think about physics. How do you render inky blacks if you have a transparent display in bright sunlight? Like these additive displays can't do that. It's like transfer modes in Photoshop. Like you've got a screen transfer mode on the world. How are you going to get inky blacks in there? You got to do some funky things. And so the Snap glasses, they've got like sort of like automatic transitions to kind of do like a very vague facsimile of what Apple's doing. But Apple leaned into just like their hardware chops. They've got a bunch of cameras. There's 2 frickin' chips. And one of the chips, the R1 chip, is just dedicated to taking all those cameras, the LiDAR sensors, and basically passing through reality that you see outside. Now that you've got everything in the world of bits, you can edit reality however you want. And so that goes back to what you're talking about, where you can sort of gracefully blend between the physical and digital world. And I think that form factor is going to keep shrinking. The current rumors point to it being like maybe a cheaper rendition of that. And I think that's going to keep compressing until we get something that, in the very near future, look more like ski goggles.
Yeah. I mean, all I have to do is just keep improving. It's like, for example, right now, I can see till about here. I can see my hand still about here.
Field of view is limited,
Yeah. And then in the Vision Pro, it's probably like here.
Yeah.
But every time it's going to go a little bit further, a little bit further. The screen is actually quite sharp.
So good.
To the point where I'm like, I think this is it. Like you don't need anything.
Yeah.
Now they do have that problem when you move and it's got like a little bit like a blur latency.
Totally. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so latency, that's an issue. Yeah. But at some point, like these are very fixable problems. Like Apple has done this repeatedly.
Yeah.
Where over time, after 5 versions, you're just like, that's not a thing anymore. Do you remember the first iPhone? You used to scroll on it.
Yeah.
And it would like skip.
A little bit.
And everyone was like, it's so smooth because that's what you were used to back then. Now you look at it and like, this is absolute trash.
Janky. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then modern phones, I mean, you could just like granularly move. Yeah. You see nothing. Yeah. Like our eyes don't even notice it anymore.
Totally. Yeah. And the refresh rates have gotten so crazy too. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess a pair of glasses, like a layer over the visual world. So like I could just see and it'll say your name over you. It'll bring your LinkedIn CV up over you.
Yeah.
I think like the next version of Tinder is going to be you go to a bar and everyone who's opted into Tinder it'll be like Jamie, she's this years old, single, whatever, and lives in whatever, and you're like, oh hey, and you go up to them in person instead of like having this digital first conversation. I think it'll actually bring people together closer, like in person, like that. I can't wait. That's going to be, I always think about like when I get older and get left behind with what the kids are doing, like what will it be? And I assume they will just live in that world all the time and be used to it. And I'll be like an interloper in that world. Just like our parents used computers.
Yeah.
It's not like they didn't, but we just used them so much more and we were used to it. We just thought like, this is how it is.
I mean, it's like you're bringing up a really good point of like these sandboxes where this type of experience will be so okay, right? Because imagine if you pull up the profile outside, that turns into Clearview AI, that turns into like surveillance state panopticon stuff. But there's so many things that we do when we go to conferences. We do all have these like dorky tags on. Like, how do I know who to talk to? So in these settings where you opt in, I think that's absolutely going to happen. And I would say that you're seeing like the point of the behavior of like the next generation. That's kind of what SnapMap and Snapchat is, right? Everyone's perpetually sharing their location. So you know where they are, like in world space, right? On the map, if you will, but also you know what their status, what they're up to. You can easily DM them. You can easily coordinate. I mean, I think back to like, just like, I'm a millennial, and it's like, dude, there was no way, like, location sharing felt like really creepy to me at the start. And if you go older and older, it gets even creepier and creepier. And so you are seeing like, these technologies are going to enable things that in certain contexts just make life so much freaking easier, that's going to be the gateway drug for a lot of people.
Facebook used to have the location service, and I loved it because every time I traveled, I'm like, oh, there's 8 friends that are around.
Yeah.
Or there's someone like at LAX right now.
Right.
And then they removed that, and I was kind of like, oh, that lowers the resolution on my life a little bit. Also, my wife shares her location with like 40 different friends.
Jeez.
And they all share their locations together.
Yeah.
I think like guy friends don't really share locations all that much. And it's cool because she could pull up, find my thing in Apple, and she knows where all her friends are.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't got that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. A lot of families do it too with like grandparents and stuff like that, just to make sure, like, if you ever need to get a hold of them or something like that.
I think it's cool too,
and
because
kids,
whenever you're driving somewhere, you're like, did they reach? And you can just pull it up instead of like, did you reach, and not hearing back from them. You just see where they are.
And again, I feel so bad for like helicopter parenting today is just like it's like grown parents. I don't know what the right way to describe that is, but it's like too... you've got access to the kid's device, their history, their location, all this stuff. It can get really weird.
I don't know. Like our church, there's all these like kids that are like the young age, like before they get phones and before you want to give them phones. A lot of them have Apple Watches. And it's the cool thing about Apple Watches, you don't get the distraction of the phone.
Right.
But you get the benefit of the phone.
Yeah.
So you know where the kid is. So you can let them go play and be like, well, we know where they are.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine. And if anything happens, they have the ability to call for help, their parents, text, all that kind of stuff.
Totally.
So they get all the benefits without it. I think maybe some AR glasses or something, the early ones will be kind of like that, where all the benefits of like some sort of watch, but...
Dude, I mean, last note on that, I think like it sucks that we use this slab of glass to mediate reality. This is already mediating reality in the physical and the digital world, but it is just such a distracting form factor. And I'm looking forward to, like you said, something that helps you connect more deeply to the world around you. And you're seeing early signs of that. And, let's say another 5 years, maybe.
This is like carrying around that in your pocket is going to be the new like desktop computer with the big CRT monitor. You'd be like, it's just kind of like a weird thing that people did.
Totally, yeah. Or it'll just be sitting there like a compute puck. You'll have it somewhere and it's like, oh, it's just sitting there, but you never use it.
Wait, when you say, so you were talking about mapping the world. Can you explain that?
I mean, like mapping the world is fascinating because it's this like timeless thing, right? Maps started off as this like tools for conquest. Like, how do you figure out a territory and like what's yours, what's mine? How do we go navigate something and do stuff in the physical world, really? And of course, now we have digital instantiations of all these maps. But to me, the way I think about maps it's like the connective tissue between the physical and the digital world. Like, that's how you connect bits and atoms. It's like maps that digitize the physical world. It's the akin to having Google search for the physical world. How do you figure out where stuff is? How do you figure out what to do and how to get there? Maps are the means of doing that. But it goes beyond that. The most like high level definition of mapping the world would be to create, which is very trendy to say, is a one-to-one digital twin of the world and all activity in it. Human, non-human, I'm talking about the weather, everything, all the systems that govern the planet that we live on, modeled as a one-to-one digital twin.
And what do you do with that?
Oh my God, so many things, right? So think about it. Once you perceive the world, you map the world, you understand what's in it, you can take actions in the world. So the simplest instantiation that everyone uses is sort of your Google Maps application. I have the opportunity to work on Google Maps for 4 years on 3D mapping, and we can get into some of the nerdier stuff there. But at the baseline, it gets you to your latte. You're in a new city. It's like, where the hell do I go? Like, what's nearby? What's beyond that? How long will it take me for me to get there? But talking about the like physical or more ephemeral elements, also traffic and busyness. How busy will it be once I get there? How much traffic is there? Do I need to reroute around these locations? And so there's a myriad of applications around just getting you from place to place. But when you think about constructing and building things in the world, surveying landscapes, what does it mean to build this building over here? How much like sunshine is it going to get? Can we put solar panels over here? How are we going to think about climate, cooling, and heating, all those type of things, extracting natural minerals and resources, and of course, other systems like AR glasses and even autonomous vehicles all rely on a map of the world.
Yeah, I've used Waymo over 40 times in this last month. One of the engineers I posted something favorable about them.
Yeah.
And they reached out, gave me free rides, and I've been using it everywhere. And it is kind of interesting. Like you could see the LiDAR map that it has like around it. So it knows the world. And it's funny, if you see someone walking their dog, you can see it like in real time, like in rendered virtual space. You're just like, oh, this thing is just playing a video game of like stay in the lines and get this person to where it needs to go. And it's all just like virtually mapped. And it sounds like Tesla's doing the same thing too. It's like that its job is to map out the world around it and be like, okay, what do I need to avoid? What do I need to do next? And it just sounds like all these things are just mapping out their own like little version of the world inside of that device.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the Apple Vision Pro in your head, when you walk around that and you turn on dev mode and you see the map that it's built, it's insane. It's like built a multi-story map of your house. And it's looking at the entities like the Waymo cars detecting 3D objects, dynamic 3D objects, like people walking around. It's like, oh, here's where your fridge is. Here's where your TV is. Here's the ceiling, the walls, the doors, the entrances. It's mapping all of that. And this is such a huge part of computer vision. And I think like this is going to be one of those things that like make computing more intuitive. Even if it's not glasses, your devices will have a very visceral spatial 3D understanding of where you are and the context of what you're doing. And combined with all the large language model stuff we're talking about and the visual language model stuff, when you combine generative AI with this like spatial intelligence, that's how you get Jarvis. And we're like on the cusp of that. You can see vignettes of that with devices like the Apple Vision Pro, with self-driving vehicles, with modes like Google Maps Immersive View or like Niantic's like visual positioning system.
So you obviously talk about all this nerdy stuff, and you post about it on on social media.
It's my jam.
What are your top social platforms that you're seeing right now? Like what are you focused on?
Yeah. For me, honestly, it's Twitter and LinkedIn. Funnily enough.
Oh, that's not what I expected you to say. Okay, LinkedIn. Oh, okay.
Well, I'll explain why. Right. So like, my biggest account is definitely TikTok, like 980 or 990K. YouTube is pretty big too, 380 or 390K. Mm-hmm. And then on X and LinkedIn, I think I am at 50-something K and 30-something K respectively. And the reason I've been focusing on that platform is I use it like my journal. Like that's the place where I just go. There's so much happening in the space. It's the least friction way of me just like documenting my insights and putting them out there and reacting to stuff. But it's also where like the people that I care about in my network right now are. So on X, I feel like it's basically all the startup founders, researchers in various academic institutions, venture capital folks, all of those folks are on X. And then when you think about, which is, you know, like with Doge and everyone's called like the managerial class, like that's on LinkedIn, I would say, like, and also like more older folks that aren't going to go be tweeting stuff are on LinkedIn. Especially the geospatial 3D community is heavily on LinkedIn as well. And so I treat those platforms largely the same, which is sort of like a journal. And most of the opportunities I've gotten have been like organic inbound and serendipitous stuff through those platforms. Then I view TikTok and YouTube as the sandbox and playground for me to go try using the new tools that I'm playing with and just make short form, fun, whimsical things. I'm not trying to be like the next, I don't know, like Michael Bay. I'm just trying to make cool tools that practically put into, into production in a sense, in a very low stakes environment, and help me figure out how to use these tools in concert, which then fuels insights that I can go share on X and LinkedIn because all the nerdy people are on there.
What is the platform that impresses people the most? For example, I have friends that have like, hundreds of thousands on TikTok, and I'm just like, but in real life, it doesn't seem to translate as much.
Yeah.
Whereas if someone has hundreds of thousands on X, I've noticed that it translates better into real life. Generally, maybe someone doesn't have, but it generally translates better. I think they do a better job at kind of like removing the bots, removing all the fake accounts, which makes your follower account smaller, but more powerful. My buddy Sam Parr, if he were to tweet, hey, we're having a meetup in Austin, in 10 minutes. 500 people could show up. Whereas on TikTok, there are people that can do it, but I've seen examples where there's just less. There's just less attention paid. Do you notice that as well?
100%.
On some of these platforms?
Oh, yeah. A lot more people are impressed with YouTube than they are with TikTok because there's like this inflation multiplier people like associate with TikTok itself. But I also think it's like a difference in the consumption experience and the kind of people that are there and what is the like purpose that they're there for. On TikTok and YouTube, you're largely there to be entertained. And I would argue even the educational content that's on there is more like fast food education. Like you didn't actually really learn anything. Like, oh yeah, you saw like somebody go through 5 steps of making this crazy 3D thing in Blender, but you still have to go learn Blender. You just felt like you were learning. Whereas on Twitter, I feel like the people that come there too are looking to learn. There's a lot more educational stuff. And they're not there with this intention of being entertained. They're like, what's the latest? What's happening? Where's the news? You know, like that curiosity mindset to me seems a lot more present on X. I would argue there's certain long form parts of YouTube where you get that too. And that's one of the things I do want to focus on. The podcast has been distracting a little bit of that, but I definitely think that there is a delta there. In terms of what people are impressed with, it's funny. It's like, I was thinking about that. It's like, it depends. It's like, I would say like sort of established old money folks are far more impressed with like, you know, the ex-Google background, the TED affiliation, things like that. Whereas like the up and coming folks, like especially like, holy shit, like you have this on TikTok and you've got this on X and like, oh, and you were like from tech, they like that kind of combination is more interesting to them. They kind of appreciate the TikTok thing a little bit more. So it's interesting. Like a lot of people I found that I've got like, I don't know, I'd like just say it's like I've got 3 dogs in me and people appreciate the different dogs. And very briefly, I'd say it's like there's the product builder that likes to like build the machine inside the machine. That's like my decade in tech and 6 years at Google. Then there's like the creator, which is like what I'm doing right now on X and LinkedIn and, you know, TikTok or whatever, is like playing with these Legos whimsically to do cool stuff. And then there's the evangelist, which is sort of like the podcast, which is like, my old business school teacher defined it as like Bilawal, you're a bridge builder. You're good at connecting the past to the present and the present to the unknown. And I've always latched onto that because that's kind of been the thing I've enjoyed doing. So I find people are impressed with different facets of that. But rarely do people understand or grok the full thing. And I'm kind of cool with that. You know, it's like, it's cool to be, I don't know, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and maybe throw a third piece in there too.
Well, so with you, you're keeping up with all these like cutting edge technology things like mapping and all this kind of stuff, visual stuff that's just been invented in the last few years. Is this like an endless source of content on social media or is it like, does it get boring to eventually just report on the 6th different breakout thing in VR? Like how do you think about it? Just what's your content strategy?
Totally.
I guess is the question.
It's a great question. I mean, like, one of the things I've actively avoided doing is trying to do like the reporting regularly on stuff thing, because I think that is a bit of a treadmill of your own creation.
News.
Yeah, and look, like I said, like Rowan is like world class. People are like, yeah, what's the newsletter to subscribe to? I'm like, just go to Rundown. Rowan's like drinking 11 cups of coffee and just cranking the shit out every day. I'd say on the YouTube side, Matt Wolf is doing something similar. One of my buddies.
He's good, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like same thing, right? Here's the week in review. So it's like, what modality do you prefer consuming? What I tend to focus on are like the things in the domains that I care about. So generative AI, perception AI, the spatial stuff that we're talking about, AR, VR, and really like the technological and product strategy implications of all of that stuff. And so like, if there's a really captivating research paper that drops, I'm absolutely going to cover it. But I try to cover the stuff that nobody else is, because either they don't have the domain knowledge or the interest to go about covering those things. And that's become a very nice niche for me, that people have started, you know, like associating me as like the spatial 3D, AR, VR, like generative visual creation person, which is a lot of buzzwords, but like all 3 of those verticals have very distinct sets of founders, researchers doing cool things. And that's the stuff I focus on because I would be doing it anyway. And this goes back to the journaling thing. The least friction way for me to like share that is on like Twitter and LinkedIn. And then what I do is I clump those together, and that becomes long form content, whether it's like a podcast episode that will then like anchor around a guest as well. So for a lot of this real world mapping stuff, I just did 2 interviews with the VP of Omniverse at NVIDIA and the SVP of Niantic. Basically like 2 facets of like NVIDIA wants to build maps for robots, and Niantic wants to do kind of what I like the stuff that I was doing at Google Maps, build maps for your phone and your glasses to figure out where you are so they can anchor and layer in 3D content in the world. And so that all comes together. All the research that I've done on them and associated fields just makes for a far more substantial, deeper conversation.
So when you talk about you do it in a long form podcast, how did the TED podcasting AI thing come about? They reached out, you reached out.
Totally,
How did that connect?
So I left Google in April last year, and after that, Ted hit me up to be like, "Yo, do you want to come?"
Just randomly, like someone at the organization followed you.
Shout out Simone. I got a DM on Twitter again, crazy.
Oh, wow, okay.
Who'd been following my work for the last year and a half on all this like 3D scanning stuff, and was like, "Yo, do you want to come give this talk and like just talk about how you're like blending reality and imagination has been my byline. So I gave that TED talk, phenomenal experience. One of the things that like, you know, it's like I never like actively wanted, like seeked out wanting to do it. But yo, I grew up on this shit. Like
where was this TED?
At Vancouver. So the main TED conference.
The main TED
yeah.
Oh, you did real TED.
I did real TED.
Because TEDx has like a very different connotation. Yeah.
It's funny. People always ask that. Yeah, it's like, yeah, absolutely. And so after that, they were looking for getting more into this AI space, right? It's become such a huge theme. And yeah, they reached out again, man. They were looking for somebody who understands the space, that had ideally worked in tech and kind of distill and demystify it and kind of has a balanced take on it. There's a lot of people out there that are like super acceleration. We got to accelerate or die. And then other folks are on the other extreme of like, you know, kind of like we got to pump the brakes and kind of like the doomer camp, if you will. I've always found myself to be a cautious optimist. And yeah, that opportunity came together and it's been a blast this past year. We're like got a couple episodes left to wrap up the season. So building on this relationship with TED, another cool thing I'd like to announce is I just signed a deal with TED to be their technology curator for TED 2025 and the rest of their conferences this year. So I'll be co-hosting a bunch of sessions. I had the opportunity to do a little bit of that last year.
Nice.
But we got a very exciting show, really focused on some of the topics we talked about today, loosely called Dual Futures. The theme for the overall conference is going to be humanity reimagined. And the subset that I'm focusing on is like how technology is like the same tech that is transforming creation is also changing global power structures, like literally in the battlefield, but everything around it too. And so you'll see some very interesting conversations this coming April around this stuff.
So you get to choose all the TED speakers?
That's
or
right.
At least for the tech part?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
That sounds pretty awesome. TED was like the very first like cool stuff online that I watched.
Same.
You remember you went to TED.com and actually watched it.
Yeah.
And you were like, you hear like Bill Gates or whoever talk about malaria or something along those lines.
And unleash some like mosquitoes.
Yeah, I remember he unleashed mosquitoes and so, or he had like poop water and there's all sorts of other crazy talks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what was it for me? It was like the Prana Mystery Sixth Sense talk, going back to the AR stuff. I don't know if you remember seeing that. Is this like MIT Media Lab chap? Like nerdy dude gets on stage and he's got this like dangling computer that reminds me of all the pendants and all this stuff that could project things. And like basically it was augmented reality before it was cool. And so that's like one of the focuses I'm trying to bring is like really put the T back into TED, man. It's like go back to like the innovation roots and make it a stage where people want to share like never before seen things. Yes, there's a space and place to go plug your next book or whatever, but like I think we got to go back to basics a little bit.
Yeah, some of the thought stuff of like, here's what I think about stuff. It's kind of like, okay, whatever. But what I thought was really impactful, I think this might be one of the most watched TEDs, the guy with the artificial legs.
Yeah.
He's like, everyone in this room with legs, your legs are getting crappier by the year.
Yeah.
And as you get older, they're going to be worse. Yeah. My legs are getting better by the year. Yeah. And then in 5 years, I will outpace your legs. And then in 20 years, you'll probably want to get rid of your real legs for my legs. And I remember, and he's just walking around the stage. You can see the close-ups of all the little hydraulics and everything. And I remember being like, that's pretty cool.
That's happening. Ray Kurzweil and all the transhumanism stuff.
Yeah.
We're on the cusp. Yeah.
So talk about like podcasting. What comes from this? Like, what is your flow? For example, my flow for podcasting is we have this long form thing. I have an agency take out all the fun bits and they upload it to TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, basically all of them.
Yeah.
Right. And then they go out into the world. I vaguely know how they do. I could see the numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know who's seeing them. I really have no idea. And then I hope people pay attention to me and then end up buying stuff that I sell on the side. Is that your rough like layout for podcasting, or do you have one or?
No, it's a bit different. I mean, it is a top of funnel in a sense, but it's more like, so there's no video. Like, surprisingly, we're not doing any video right now. And so we do occasional clip downs. So when we broke like the scoop on OpenAI board member Helen Toner or the UN report on AI with Ian Bremmer, we'll do like short form and then long form videos that go on TED.com for that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's audio only. We crossed 1.1 million listeners, listens or downloads 8 episodes in. So it's great.
Nice.
And we're typically top 15 in the UK. We're like ranked 6 and 7 on Spotify and Apple right now, which is awesome. Really, it's about like distilling down super complicated topics and making it accessible to as many people, like threading this needle. And this has really been a useful exercise for me, being like I'm an engineer by trade, like worked as a PM, like how do you distill down really heady, complicated topics that are technically interesting, but also societally very disruptive, and make it digestible in like a 30, 40, 50-minute conversation with some really smart people? So largely I view it as a way of like talking to extremely smart people, getting up to speed on stuff, and then taking all this other nerdy stuff that I've accumulated, piecing it together in a way that's very easy for people to understand. I really need to figure out a way to like use more videos and things from that. I haven't done any of that yet. I like occasionally post like, what is it called? Audiograms on Twitter or X. Basically, it's like the text.
Oh, the waveform. Oh yeah. So essentially
like,
garbage.
Yeah, it's essentially garbage. I like basically stopped doing that. We did something cool with like DARPA's director of AI stuff, I2O. And so for stuff like that I'm like, yo, people really need to like find some people, the true ones that are interested that need to see it. But largely I view it as like that third bucket, the evangelist bucket that I mentioned. And then the insights and connections from that fuel the other two bits that I talked about, the product building part and then the creation part.
So speaking of like the creator economy stuff, like you put out all these things, and like I know creator economy, I feel like it's like, I don't know if it's a bubble or not, but a lot of people are like, just put stuff out online and you'll get attention.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily true anymore. I think you're competing with a lot of people that are really, really, really good.
Yep.
And so there is a ton of competition. And it used to be like, you went to your local newspaper reporter for advice, but now you can just go to like the best psychiatrist in the world on Twitter, on YouTube. And so it's like this one person gets a ton of attention, and all the smaller people that are not as good just really get not as much.
The power law, right?
Yeah. And so it's directing to like a few of these people that are authorities on certain things. So where do you see all this stuff going? Like the monetization, because I've noticed there is like this weird thing of like, you put out videos, you put out tweets and everything, but then you also have to sell something separate to make any money at all.
100%. Yeah.
You're seeing a couple good moves, like X is starting to pay out people that get a certain amount of impressions.
And the pays are getting better, clearly.
YouTube gives you some pay. Totally. Like it's not full-time revenue, but it's something.
Yeah, totally.
So is that the trend where it's just going to be like, you listen to me and somehow I get money directly from that? I assume it's going there. Do you see any, what are your thoughts right now? That's
a great question. I mean, like this is pre-AI. This has been so elusive too, right? Like you're right. YouTube is probably the best passive monetization platform right now for creators. They clearly nailed it with AdSense, have a decent cut. Now, at the same time, you're right. There is a power law distribution. The biggest creators in the world are now effectively not just competing with YouTubers, they're competing with the Netflixes of the world, right? Like you look at Mr. Beast, like the production value at the like top 0.01% of YouTube creators is like going up and up. They're doing like $1 million productions per piece of content, right? Netflix is conversely feeling a downward pressure, right? Like, so like, how the hell is the entertainment industry going to make money is a big problem too. The VFX industry is this like constant downward spiral. And now you take what like, you could think of as like akin to like, I don't know, like a nuclear bomb for this whole industry with generative AI. Like what the hell is actually going to happen? I don't think anyone knows, to be honest. Like I see like two possible futures here. One is like, you're going to have sort of like this division of what I would loosely call like Whole Foods versus like Costco and like, Sam's Club or whatever, which is there's going to be a small number of people, maybe they're older or not, I don't know. Even the younger generation has kind of a back to basics type trend going. Oh, organic analog is so much better. They're going to pay a premium for like kind of human generated content that you can charge for. You might be paying it directly, subscription service islands of influence that are going to charge money and like meter what you do in those worlds. And that might be very lucrative, but in majority, I think like a lot of people are just going to want Mountain Dew straight to the vein, if I'm being jaded about it. Right. And it's like Costco. It's like, Costco's like, making way more money than Whole Foods is. It's like, it's staggering. And so I think on that Costco end, what does the content equivalent look like? Even there, I have like two worlds that I see. One is, hey, this is going to be the most egalitarian Hunger Games we've ever seen. The difference between the haves and the have-nots is going to be so drastic. Your production value is going to be good enough, even with your iPhone and a couple of AI tools in your bedroom, that you could rival like, a massive, I don't know, Dude Perfect studio in Dallas or something like that. And then it's like, how good is the content? That's one way that it could go. The other way that could go is sort of like what we're seeing playing out at the platform infrastructure level, to go back to where we started, where the big companies that have distribution, that have data advantages, that have mind share with the audience are just going to crank out so much more content that Mr. Beast would be long dead, but there are Mr. Beast videos constantly going up. Or we're on like, I don't know, Mission Impossible 24 and it's still freaking Tom Cruise and he's still young, completely deepfaked. So honestly, I don't know how exactly all of that's going to play out. The way I think about it practically, since I feel like most futurists can't really call themselves futurists anymore, since you can't see past this haze of a year, is basically like build your island of influence right now where there is this arbitrage opportunity to use generative AI to create influence, build trust, which I think is very important. I don't want to show myself out to like just having a bunch of sponsors and taking a sponsor for every new creation tool that comes out there. Mm-hmm. And once you have that influence, as these tools get better, you'll have this like crazy flywheel force multiplier that will allow you to stay entrenched in the market. That's at least my hope. I may be totally wrong and we may get replaced by two multimodal notebook LM hosts. And, like
it's possible.
People won't care because it's valuable.
I mean, just see like there's people creating stuff, but not getting paid for it at all. Right. So you remember Vsauce?
Yeah.
It was one of the first like real interesting YouTubers around. He's like 45 million views on each video, that kind of thing. He'd make these long, well thought out videos.
Yep.
And they started being from 5 minutes to 22 minutes, and he would spend months researching them.
Sure.
And he'd film them and make them himself. The problem is there's just not enough money for that to be like a full-time thing. So he started a side business called, I think called Curiosity Box or something. He's like, send a box of stuff to you every month.
Oh, yeah.
That started making millions of dollars. So he was just like, well, this makes money. This other thing doesn't. So he just went to shorts of like, hey, here's a cool thing you can do with a piece of paper. So it's like, okay, it's like little bite-sized things, but it's his only way to stay sane while running a business, actually making money, which at some point someone has to do.
Totally, yeah.
So whereas I think he would have served the universe a lot better making more of those really, really, really solid videos.
Sure.
But there's no direct way for him to make money off of it. You can ask for Patreon stuff, but it's still like you end up being just like this PBS pledge drive all the time.
Yeah, it's like, oh, cool, here's $100K. Awesome.
Or you could take a big sponsor. You go, oh, by the way, use Dell computers. Like that's the other way. And I think people are just like somewhat don't love that idea.
Yeah.
And so I do think that in a perfect world, someone would watch this video, go like, I got value out of it, and give us money directly.
Yeah,
me
totally.
And maybe you. Somehow. And I assume that's going to be enabled by some sort of like small crypto transaction, like
microtransactions.
Yeah, where I could say, hey, web browser, and the Brave browser kind of does this.
Yeah.
Hey, web browser, tip everyone that I consume their content some money, and I put $5 into the Brave browser, and it splits it up. So I watch one of your short clips, it gives you 0.01 cent. Right. And then on aggregate, that ends up being like some money. So until those days, everyone has to go like this roundabout way with this creator stuff.
Totally. And in the case of YouTube, it's like, did you skip the ad or not? Or if you're on premium, let's give you some fraction of your like subscription money to a person. I wonder if X could honestly do that too. Like Elon keeps talking about making it more of a payment transaction system inside of X. So I wonder if you had an existing kind of piggy bank of money sitting around, like not that you had to like, pull something from your bank account or whatever, would you be more inclined to do this type of tipping, right? Like, I wonder if that could create this like really
streamers are always ahead of the game and everything.
Totally, yeah.
Streamers
TikTok as well,
figured this stuff out
100%.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know, but when people stream, they're just like, hey, give me money, and whoever pops up, gives the most, gets their thing on the screen,
or
whatever.
Gets a
and it
shout
just
out,
sounds silly, but you're just like, this person's literally making money by being on the stream.
Yeah, totally.
And there's just no analog to that in the normal content creator world outside of the streaming world. So I do have hope that like this already exists.
Yeah.
It's just not ported over to the real world yet.
I mean, this is your bread and butter, but you're totally right that right now, the way you monetize as a creator is like you build that island of influence and then you have an offer to give them. And that offer may be your digital product, service, course, your startup or whatever. You're seeing this also happening in the VC and sort of startup funded world, which is like the joke is like first time founders are all about like, I need to find product market fit and build the best product. Second time founders, like, how do I get distribution? Like, how do I get my product in front of people, right? That's why these newsletters continue to make money. I think it's very interesting. You get that mid-roll ad spot. That's where you get a bunch of clicks onto your product for folks to check your stuff out. And so I wonder, like, what's going to happen in this world where you're seeing, at least on the high end of creation, right? You've got the Logan Pauls and the KSIs of the world that are like, yo, I got the US North America market on pat. You got the EMEA European market on pat, like KSI. Let's get together, build a brand that they're going to sell probably to Gatorade, PepsiCo, or whoever the hell in the future. Are we going to see the unbundling of that, not just on the highest end, but the smaller end? You kind of are. People are starting to build these SaaS products and services, build a community that isn't just like a freaking glorified Discord, but is a little bit more than that. And I expect to see that growing. And AI, a lot of the creators, how they're making a lot of bank is honestly courses on Maven, and Kajabi. It's like huge, right? Like you said, there's so much changing that most people don't have the time to go keep track of, like, oh shit, what can I do with a new ideogram or MidJourney or whatever, right? And so having that distilled down, there is still a clear value proposition where you are willing to trade money to get to save a bunch of time. And, it's interesting. Do you want to be like an AI course bro? I don't know. I tried doing 2 cohorts. I enjoyed it, made great money, but I just didn't enjoy teaching live. But I am considering doing a VOD version of something like that.
But by cohort number, this is the world I live in, by cohort number 13, you'll be burned out and your audience will be burned out.
By 2, I was done. Dude.
Course fatigue is a real thing, or cohort fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people who started cohorts somewhere around the pandemic were just like, wow, this is great. And the reason was everyone was at home, and that was the way to do it.
Exactly.
And they have seen like a lot of erosion of that.
Yep.
And I remember I saw people go up really quick, and I was just like, I wonder what happens when people just aren't as interested in it.
It's an ebb and flow. And the same thing with SaaS products, right? Flux model drops. There's a moment before all the big companies are going to integrate that simple upload 6 photos and train the Neville avatar feature. And for 3 months, you could be a solopreneur that hacks something really janky together. And some of these things are freaking janky, but it still solves a problem, and it saves people going through the time and effort of setting everything up locally, knowing how to code, and then boom, you get that. I wonder what's going to happen to that too, as not only content becomes disposable, but software does too. I don't know if you played with Replit Agent or Cursor, any of these coding tools. Dude, it's you can make throwaway software. It's I made this software, it's useful for today, and then I don't need to use it again. And a weird example that I just recently did is I was sick of going to all those sketchy websites to download a YouTube video. Yeah.
I
just want to download this YouTube, or go to 4K video downloader, but then there's so many banner ads. I put in 2 prompts into Replit, and now I have the perfect YouTube downloading app built out, and I can run it at any time. And it that itself made up for the subscription for me. So all of these things feel like ephemeral opportunities, which is why I keep saying that there's going to be windows of time as this tech keeps advancing faster and faster to take advantage of that arbitrage. But then you have to keep relearning and relearning and relearning. And that's the fun or exhausting part, depending on if you want to be a lifelong learner or not.
I do think I remember in the 2000s, Google saved the web with AdSense.
Sure.
So I used to post websites, and I remember I had Neville's cool car archive. I was in high school. It was body kits on Mitsubishi Eclipses, and I thought it was badass. And I would Photoshop some of the pictures to look cooler, have black backgrounds. Yeah. And people would link my stuff, and I'd be like, hey, you can't hot link my stuff because I have to pay for it. And I'm in high school. I can't afford it. It's too expensive for me to run the server. Now I'm send me all the links you can, all day, because bandwidth is free.
Yep.
But back then I had to be careful of it. And then AdSense saved the internet by saying, hey, I could just put this snippet on there and make $40 a month when people come to my website.
Yeah.
That completely saved the internet. And I do think that hopefully there's something kind of like the way of X payouts, YouTube payouts, that's going to boost content to where all these people can actually spend all their time just doing sick ass content and not having to monetize outside. I don't think we're there yet, but I do look forward to a day when that's possible and people are just going to make awesome content.
I really wonder how consumption behavior is going to change over time, right? You've got this sort of pendulum between short form content and short form fatigue and then long form stuff, right? And if you think about something like TikTok or just shorts, any short form platform is basically a bunch of short form content, algorithm in the middle, serving it up to the user based on what the user likes. As AI keeps getting better and better, sometimes I feel every video that I'm uploading or content I'm uploading is I'm training my replacement in a way. A lot of creators are getting this weird, uncanny feeling. At some point, when all the content is personalized to you, it's like to your context. Like based on all that interest graph that like ByteDance or TikTok derived about you, if you can create the perfect piece of content for that moment just in time, what does that mean? Who's going to own that? Is it going to be like MCNs and talent agencies on steroids of like the little Michaelas, the virtual YouTubers of the world, which is huge in like Japan certainly, but is starting to get big in the West as well? Or is it going to be like a bunch of creators again that have built their islands of influence that are like their bots are going out and putting out this personalized content, right? Like it's the Marquez video personalized to you for what you would care about the new iPhone 32 Max Pro Ultra or whatever the hell. You know what I mean? And so it's really interesting to think about, like, and there's maybe the far more dystopian version of that is where all that power just aggregates to the platforms that have all this data. And that would be a really sad world because you would truly have like 4 or 5, like an oligopoly of companies that have complete dominion over not just distribution, but also creation. Now, I think I have more faith in humans valuing content and humans being smart enough to create a value prop that's synergistic, but that's certainly a future a lot of people worry about.
So you can't predict too far out into the future, like you said. Like you said, like this hazy sunglasses after about a year. Maybe not even that much time.
Yeah.
What are you focusing on in 2025? Are you going to like post more on X? Do you have any sort of plan like that or just like continue the way it's going? Any sort of plan for 2025 then?
For sure. So I'm like a year and 8 months into doing this all full time, right? And so currently, those 3 facets, the 3 dogs in me that I described, I want to be more intentional about bringing them together and kind of sharing those facets with people. I want people to understand which lens that I'm bringing to a specific piece of content. So a couple things on my mind are definitely this like digital products approach around, I don't know what it is. It's funny. My business manager keeps telling me to fucking write a book. Like this is also like,
dude, you should.
Oh man, it's like
we'll talk about it later, but yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Okay, please do. Yeah, and there's like 2 different books I could write, so I'll get your thoughts on that. But like, there's definitely this book around like mapping the world in spatial intelligence. All that knowledge isn't online. A lot of it is very niche. There's only a few companies that you can go to build that expertise, and I want to share that interestingly. Like I want to talk to people about like what is even the satellite imaging market? What are the cool things that you can do there? So expect to see a lot more long form content from me. I will also be looking at the right way. I'm talking to Kajabi about this is like to do sort of this sort of self-serve model, which isn't like here's this all-encompassing frickin' masterclass, which is what I did with Maven. It was fun, but really exhausting. But more like, here's a module on how I use like 3D scanning and generative AI technologies to have like a spaceship crash in my backyard. And in 2 hours, you can learn exactly how to do that too. And it pulls together 3 or 4 different tools and just gives you the workflow. And maybe selling it as a subscription service. I'm still validating this idea and critically building a brand around it. I think right now my brand is really just Bilawal Sidhu, and then like the other stuff I do with TED or elsewhere, the A16Z scouting stuff. I want to build something that isn't attached to my name, that is like an entity in itself. And, maybe that's a future conversation we could have too. So those are the things that are on my mind. Having tried the full stack of monetization, like I'll continue to do some brand sponsorships. Really love working with bigger companies. I don't like working with startups. I like advising and investing in startups, but I love working with like the Lenovos of the world and the Qualcomms of the world. Things like that. Goes back to your HP example to an extent too, to be honest. And so that's what I have lined up for next year. I'm super excited about it.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I have seen some of the best podcast monetization is not actually taking sponsorships and stuff like that. It's something like My First Million did. Just get bought by HubSpot. And they pay you a big check every month to just keep doing it. And then they just buy up 100%.
That's a cool setup. Yeah, I need to dig into that story more. Yeah.
That is, we could talk about it more, but like that is like probably the best way to monetize a podcast is have a larger company that's footing the bill. Yeah. And then hopefully a portion of the audience goes and buys their stuff. That seems to be, in my experience, the best way, besides someone like some outlier like Joe Rogan or something like that.
Yeah.
For the most part, for an average podcast, if you're part of a network like that, that seems to be the best way to make money from it steadily.
Totally.
Rather than just pimping out, a bunch of different ad spots.
Oh God. Yeah.
Which is its own, like, you got to have a whole thing going on for that.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned the A16Z scouting thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually unclear. Like, what does that involve? Well, what is an A16Z scout?
Yeah, so basically scouts are people who have industry expertise or a network basically to go out and invest in pre-seed and seed stage founders. Like scouting the market for like who are the nascent talent, let's say like Stanford PhDs that are about to dip out into a company, or folks at Google, Meta, whatever, that want to do something in an interesting space. do a pre-seed seed investment with the hope that like basically that's going to be a funnel into like a follow-on round.
Wait, are you talking about there's like some mega cracked out 17-year-old kid in college that's doing really well in computer science? You meet him and you're just like, this kid's going places.
Oh, totally.
And he hasn't started a company yet, but you're like, we want to give you money. Is that, am I misunderstanding that?
It's basically that it doesn't have to be that early. So right now it's a lot more PhDs, for example. I like master's or PhD level, especially again, the domains that I'm focused on, there's like a bunch of scouts focusing on different things, is like this generative AI, like creation tools, spatial intelligence, and AR, VR. So that tends to be people who are either in industry or are further advanced in their career. But that's exactly it, man. Like it's really, really fun. It's like an amazing way to like learn about the investing landscape. One of the things I would want to do in the future is start a fund, and I view this as like a perfect way. Like I love the A16Z folks themselves, but it's also such a great way to meet founders. And so like, as an example, I got to be a pre-seed check in Pika Labs, one of the AI video companies. And like, that's been amazing. Or Hedra, that's also been like amazing to see, just like doing all this like facial animation stuff. And now I'm getting into defense tech, which is really fascinating because it takes like that old geospatial intelligence world, like building maps for consumers, but doing it for, you know,
roads.
Not just various use cases, but doing it for, I would say, like a bigger cause, and doing it for the public sector, which is very exciting given how dual use all this tech is. So I can like just. It's the way this is the closest way I have right now to scratching that like product dog itch in me, which is like living vicariously through these founders. It's not the same because I don't have like I'm not like, I don't like get impacted by the decisions that they're making, but it's a way for me to see what founders across a bunch of areas are doing for the tools that I am using day to day. So I'm like, in a sense, they're super user too. And that's really my selection criteria, is basically like really talented founders that have a deep bench of expertise. They've got a cool vision, and it's a tool that I either like want to use or am using already.
So let's talk about this. AI kills jobs.
Oh gosh!
Any technology ends up killing jobs and then ends up making them. As we've seen in history. Yeah. So back in the day, you're a weaver, you weave at home, and then like someone invents the loom, and you're like, well, what is my whole family going to do? How are we going to eat? Or you're a horse breeder, and then like the car comes out, and you're like, shit. Well, you know, the writing's on the wall. What are we going to do? So are you seeing jobs, you know, disappearing right now?
Man. This is a fascinating question. Let me think about this. Is the right way to answer this a little bit.
Take your time.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a fascinating question. I think it's like, we can almost build on the media conversation we're seeing. Like overall, there's a downward pressure in the number of jobs. I think there's going to be a contraction in the net number of jobs over time. This is now me like speculating beyond the 1 year horizon. I'm talking about a decade. And so I think like there's a world in which like the thing that survives, the thing that thrives even, is going to be sort of this notion of the generalist specialist. Like if we are thinking about AIs get very good at doing these like persona specific tasks, you still need the conductor of the symphony. I'm not convinced that that conductor of the symphony is going to be fully AI autonomous anytime soon, or even if it could be, we're going to have a human in the loop at that level. So I think like people who know about a bunch of different disciplines are very quick at keeping stuff like learning and staying up to date with stuff, and like know exactly like a conductor maybe knows how to play a couple of instruments in the orchestra, but they really know how to have them work in harmony and like conduct the symphony. That's the future I see. I think there's going to be certainly a huge class of jobs that will be eliminated. I'm sure there are going to be classes of jobs that are created. And what I see right now is, again, back to the world of, you know, bits being ways and then the world of atoms. I think like these data centers are going to turn into the equivalent of like Borg cubes. Like you talked about the nuclear reactors and stuff like that. These are like going to be things like, if anyone's been to a data center, it already feels like a Borg cube. And this is like, we're trying to build the biggest data centers on the planet, where some people are projecting like 15 to 20% of a yearly like energy consumption of a country is going to go to these data centers. And so you need people to keep those machines up. NVIDIA chips are notoriously bad at like failing. Things in the physical world fail all the time. So I imagine this world where a lot of the things that we do, especially in the next decade, as robotics lags behind, the world of software, is going to be things that we can do with our hands that we can do physically right now. And you're already seeing this trend where like, I was catching up with this like B-school teacher that I mentioned earlier. She mentioned that some of her students are, instead of going to do like a Big Four accounting job and get paid $75K, are going to be like, you know, like a fireman, or going to be a plumber and making $115, $120K and working a fraction of the hours. I think that trend is going to continue as well. And maybe that'll be good for humans as a whole as we get back to using our hands and back to like away from these slabs of glass that mediate reality. But everything else, I think you're going to be able to go so much farther with a smaller team. At the same time, in the shorter term, let's say in the next 2 to 5 years or 3 to 5 years, a lot of companies are going to have this force multiplier effect where they are going to hire more because they can suddenly just get more done as well. But in the long term, I see this downward pressure, just like we're seeing on Netflix, to like, we got to bring the cost of production down lower. We got to make more movies for more like markets, things like that. Competition on YouTube's going to go up. Everyone's going to be like competing against each other to create even more content. And so like, that's roughly, you know, I would say some like loose notes on where I think the future is going. Again, I reevaluate these predictions every 6 to 8 months because like, oh shit, this new breakthrough happened that actually fundamentally undercuts one of the assumptions that I made.
Yeah, I imagine there's a generational shift, and we're at the age where you like actually feel it. So my parents, whenever I started being like an entrepreneur right out of college, that was just an unusual thing to do at the time. That was a very unsecured job path. So they of course wanted me to get a job at a bigger company, which made sense because in their generation, that's how you had a family, that's how you made money, and that's how you were stable and earned a living. And then I was just like, well, now there's these new tools like the internet where I can like branch out much larger, and so that it's a shift. And so for them, like that wasn't as obvious. And the normal thing was getting a job, right? So I think I was reasonably right in that like you can start a business and like thrive. At the same time, I do think we are thinking like if our kids wanted to be like a makeup artist or a barista, you'd be like, wait, that's a big step down. Like it used to be doctor and engineer. What are you talking about? And to them, they're just like, that shit's going away. Doctor, engineer. I mean, that's just like analyzing an MRI and saying like, if you have cancer or not. Let me guess.
All
like
the
a computer can do this a lot better. And a trillion times faster than you.
Totally.
And so, but being a barista, that's still hard. Right. So it sounds like the economy is like the difference between like what can computers already kind of do, automate out versus what they can't. So right now, taking this and putting it here is really hard. A computer.
That's
currently.
That's like a flagship NVIDIA keynote demo. Look, we have a robot that can pick up.
That can go from here to here. And if it falls over, it craps out. You know, and at some point it won't. But it's something, it seems like there is like an end point where it's just like there's a full robot suit that's as good or better than a human, and then intelligence as good or better than a human. And at that point, I figure like the logical things, we all just become robots. Like if you disassociate that from being sad or anything like that, you're just like, that is just the end state. Like, I mean, I think it has to be.
Oh, totally. I would say even in the near term, it'll be us like, you know, teleoperating these robots, like people on an oil rig, like, you know, people in like, you know, an oil mine, you know, people in coal mines doing all these like very, gosh, the battlefield is going to change in a big way, especially with drones already. But I think there's going to be a lot of this, like I like to kind of joke where it's like the Call of Duty to drone pilot pipeline is just going to get even better now with all these technologies, especially as kids are in VR, like growing up in Roblox and VR chat. I think you're totally right. But like we're going towards this future where like there is certainly a convergence happening with technology. But at the same time, another way to think about this future is sort of like, imagine a world of radical abundance, right? Which like, gosh, the Singularity University folks, like all those folks have been saying for like, you know, God knows how long. But if you think about it, like it is interesting to think about like if on your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if your baseline amount of stuff is taken care of, let's leave aside if it's UBI, something else, whatever. In this world of abundance, money may actually matter way less. Like money may not be the thing that you're chasing after because we get so good, so efficient at manufacturing, doing all these things that there's actually a downward pressure on all the costs. That means you can get whatever the heck you want. And then what does that mean for you? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to find meaning in a world of abundance is a really interesting question. And there, I think there's going to be a forking of society. There's going to be people who are like, well, I just want to like merge with the machines and live forever. The transhumanist movement is going to continue. But I think you are going to see sort of like a pushback against that. And you're already seeing that even in Gen Z and younger kids that are like ditching, they're realizing how much, you know, like the technology mediating every interaction in the physical and digital world isn't purely a net good. And so I can imagine a world where we're going back to like, I don't know, going to cabins and writing and doing poetry and things that, yeah, you could have AIs do, but now we have all this time. So we do things that give us satisfaction, and that may bring us back to community too. So that's kind of what I see happening, probably both in parallel, to be honest.
Maybe the Amish got it right.
Oh, I mean, certainly, like, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, like, even just in my lifetime, I've noticed like what used to take 100 people takes like one person now. So I just wrote an essay about this. For about $3,000 a month, I put out more stuff and get more reach than a local newspaper, a local TV station, and a local radio station combined.
It's insane, right?
And that used to be hundreds of jobs.
Yeah.
Typesetters, distribution, product manager, people getting advertisers, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's all just kind of, now it's just me and like, an assistant or something.
It's wild, right?
Yeah. Dude. So what's going to be, what now takes 100 people, and in 20 years, maybe less now at this pace, one person will be able to do all that.
I think it's going to be wild. Yeah, there's going to be so many. I mean, already the rise of the 100x creator, the 100x entrepreneur, the 100x insert profession is going to happen. And it's even journalism, if you think about it. It's funny, like, speaking of X, another reason I love X is, like, to your point, Ben Affleck made a bunch of these comments about AI, and I posted this thing on Twitter, went viral, like a bunch of other people like quoted it. And then Newsweek took my tweet, my commentary, and then the comments within it and turned it into a freaking like Newsweek article. That was just like a fun thing that you're tweeting here. So just imagine, this is work that a journalist would have done, gone and conducted 5 or 6 expert interviews, synthesized that stuff together. And now asynchronously, a bunch of people on their freaking phones commenting are turning into something that's like kind of mainstream news. Like, there's so many like things, even at a more atomic unit than a job, that is just going to get like totally disrupted. That's again why it's hard to predict where this is going to go.
Yeah, I was at a Jason Calcanis talk, and he was talking about like tool belt generation tool belt. He had some like cute word for it, but it's just, like you said, like makeup artist, barista, massage therapist, like these types of people.
Electrician. Oh my God. Yeah.
So basically all the trades. That
100%.
What was once called blue collar now might be like
premium.
Might move up to our better version of whatever collar.
Oh, 110%. Yeah.
Yeah. I think not yet. Like right now, everyone still would rather own a software company than be a plumber, right?
Totally.
I think it is a little bit glorified online. People are like, just be a plumber. It's just like, have you ever hired a plumber? You see what they do all day?
Yeah, totally.
Like you're ripping out a toilet, their shit smell. I mean, like it's not exactly. They're lifting 40-pound toilets.
It's not glamorous. Yeah,
it's not exactly glamorous. I'm not saying it's bad either, because I love doing house projects. I get the satisfaction in it, but also they have to be in a certain city all the time.
But here's the difference:
be on call all the time.
They're not doing this like 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, right? It's so like it ebbs and flows, and it's still a good lifestyle. So yeah, you're in it. You're doing this stuff, and dealing with the crap and the whatever, but then you go off and like chill in Hawaii for a little while. It's like, I don't know if you've seen the trend on TikTok where kids are glamorizing these trade professions to like other Gen Z kids. Like, yo, I love being an electrician for this reason. I'm going to go fix this like cell tower, climb up, and here's what I do. And like, they're doing the whole TikTok thing. And I'm like, this is kind of cool, because this is another thing like I think America needs. If you have too many people, like, the primary, secondary, tertiary economy, if so many people are in the tertiary economy, like, what about all the other stuff that we need to fuel the tertiary economy and just live day to day and keep our roads, streets, infrastructure going? This is where China has a less hard time, because they do have a lot of people that are interested in doing those things. And yeah, their folks need to lean into immigration and other stuff to figure out all of those things.
Even at this point, let's say I had a kid that was going to college. They're like, we either go to trade school or a college. It'd be like, I don't know, trade school seems kind of good. So where can people find you? Where can they subscribe, watch, all that kind of stuff?
Hell yeah, man. So bilawal.in, bilawal.in is my website. I've got links to everything else. Bilawal Sidhu on Twitter, you can look me up. LinkedIn, obviously there as well. On YouTube, you can find me on BillyFX. Same thing with TikTok, BillyFX. And check out the TED AI show as well, available wherever you get your podcasts.
You just subscribe on Apple.
Oh, hell yeah. Apple,
Nice.
Spotify. Oh, and subscribe to my newsletter, which I need to get, like, the one thing everyone keeps telling me is like, yo, why aren't you building your mailing list? Spatialintelligence.ai. If you want like a synthesis of all this nerdy stuff that we talked about, and you just want to like basically get a one-stop shop to figure out all these intersecting domains that connect the physical and digital, spatialintelligence.ai.
You heard it here first. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.